What we're going to talk about today is searching for Homo self-medicus, separating facts from myth and how consumers choose self-medication products. Now, there's a bunch of people that are sort of involved in this research. Two folks I want to highlight a lot are Reactance and Andy West. Both have been fairly instrumental at this phase. Everybody's been involved. It's a big group, okay? So I use this term, Homo self-medicus, okay? We're actually trying to figure out, is there a better way to describe this? And this is probably the best we can deal with. This is the person who's presumed to buy self-medication products in Australia. Now, we have a hard time identifying this person, okay? Now, certainly there's many reasons why you want to know who that person is, and one of the big uses is, of course, you got to regulate it in some way. So depending on how you conceptualize this person who buys this stuff, really will dictate how you're going to regulate it in some way, shape, or form. Now, for the most part, the conceptualization I've sort of been given when you listen to what regulators say, it seems like this person is a very shy creature. I'm having difficulty finding them, okay? Now, we've done a bunch of qualitative research, a bunch of focus groups, and maybe one or two of the folks in the focus groups are closest we can find to it. And since, for the most part, Reactance and I did the focus groups, we seem to be the closest folks to Homo self-medicus that we could actually find. It wasn't actually our subjects, it was us as the researchers. Now, so Homo self-medicus is a very shy creature. Now I want to contrast that with Homo sapiens. Now, I've spent the last 25, 30 years studying how Homo sapiens buys stuff, which is a very different creature. Now, Australian Bureau of Statistics reports that there's at least 23 million Homo sapiens in Australia alone, okay? So that's good. It's not clear how many Homo self-medicuses there are. I kept looking for the tag in the ABS webpage and I couldn't find it. Okay, now, to tell you a little bit more about this Homo self-medicus, here's sort of a list of the way they think. First, they know and understand active ingredients from OTCs and comp meds. They shop on active ingredients. They want active ingredients more prominent on packs. Now, when we were doing the qualitative research, I started off playing it straight using the technical names for the various drugs. For example, I'd refer to paracetamol. I would refer to pseudoephedrine. And folks would just look at me sideways and say, "Are you talking about Codral?" Okay, yes, that's it. Let's keep going. But that's the way they think about it. They think about it in terms of brand names. Now, supposedly, this Homo self-medicus, the brand names are not important when selecting OTCs and comp meds. Now, this completely contradicts 50 years of consumer research on the focus on brands. You know, you go back to the earliest work in 1962 on purchase histories, it's always about brands, again and again and again. And the number one thing is brands. The second thing that comes out is sales promotions. So that's where the literature is. But it seems to play no bearing on understanding who this decision maker is in Australia. Wants to know explicitly about how OTC and comp meds products are regulated. From the qualitative research, they didn't care. They knew that they were. They appreciated the fact that they were, but they didn't want to know the details of those things. Wants to know everything, and you can never give them enough information. Well, there's certain information that they want, and they have to go search for it because it's not easy to get, and it's definitely not on the packages. Can't self-select adequately and always needs the aid of a healthcare practitioner. Look, there are a bunch of folks that they just did not want to talk to anybody. They wanted to stand there in the aisle and keep away the sales clerk that would walk up to them. They just, stay away from me, stay away from me. Now, if they wanted to, they might go talk to a pharmacist or someone else. But there were others that wanted to talk to anybody. They were extremely varied in that regard. Let's see, access and convenience isn't important. Well, look, that isn't what the qualitative research that we ran into said. It was very important, being able to go to the shop and get something. Now, a lot of the times, they would be, you know, they weren't feeling well when they were going and buying this stuff. They just wanted to go down to the shop and get it. Let's see, always hear about new meds and therapies now available from the pharmacist. No, it was almost always from advertising. And of course, that's not going to surprise anybody in this room. Always buys the generic. Ooh, this was a matter of huge debate in the groups. And the groups were, no, brands, brands, brands. Okay? There was like one person that we ran into that looked at these things as, okay, first I get the brand name packet and I read the active ingredients, I put that down, and then I look for the active ingredients and everything else. One consumer out of like over 40. This was not many that thought that way. A statement on purpose on the front of the package is not important. This is the stuff they really wanted. They wanted something in plain English they could understand. Graphics and pictures on the label just create unnecessary clutter, which detracts him or her from important information. Again, there was no evidence that it was like this. So all these presumptions by regulators, we were having a really hard time trying to identify that and replicate that this is the way they thought. Consumers don't think like this. Now, it explains how maybe a pharmacist would approach this, but it's not what average consumers do. Now, let's see. I want to contrast this Homo self-medicus with somebody else, Homo sapiens, who I tend to study. Homo sapiens usually organize decisions by brands. That's just the way they operate, and they've been doing this longer than I've been living. They're also cognitive misers, but they make good decisions anyways. Now, this is something that marketers often try and figure out, try and understand. You know, they don't seem to do as much decision-making as we think they do, but they do it a little bit more strategically. How do they do that? It builds over time. So understanding how they make good decisions without as much decision-making, that's a puzzle. But believe it or not, they really do make good decisions over time. Multiple segments of unique consumers, okay? We've got lots of consumers out there and different types of consumers. There might be some that might be segment A, some might be segment B, some might be segment C. They all are different kinds of consumers operating in different ways. And the things that might help one group may not help another group. So you got to keep in mind, it's not sort of a homogeneous mob of consumers. They're actually quite different from one another. Now, the last one I think is a little bit interesting. Most real consumers are extremely hard to control, okay? They're subject to a thing called reactance. Reactance is an old effect that we talk about in marketing, to whereas if people feel they have the right to choose something, and that choice is taken away from them, boy, they not only resent that, they want the thing that's taken away from them. So, for the most part, the theme that was overwhelming in the kind of qualitative research we've done so far is consumers wanted control over their illnesses. It's like, I'm the one who's sick. They wanted control. Now, they understood they had to cede this control because they may not have enough information. But while they're willing to cede control, at the same time, they don't want to be treated like a fool. So you mix that with some of the sort of notions that come out of regulation, you're getting something very different than sort of the picture of Homo self-medicus that some folks would want us to believe is out there. It's actually quite a bit different. And in fact, if consumers feel like they have the right to choose, then restricting their right to choose for what might seem inappropriate reasons or reasons that don't apply to them, not only are they going to resist that system, they're going to want the exact thing that's being withheld from them. And that's the idea behind reactance. They want what's being withheld, and you ain't going to change them, okay? Now the idea is, do you sit there and impose on Australian consumers an idea of, this is the way we're going to do it, the government thinks it's best for you, and to heck with whether or not you think it's good? Or do you work with the ways in which they approach things themselves and work within those constraints, go with the flow? That's sort of the choice. As a marketer, I choose the latter, understand the way consumers think, and work within those systems to come up with something that's useful and helpful. Now, from the qualitative research, we've identified at least 4 different groups, and in later phases, we're probably going to either double or triple this number. We got a couple of different types, 4 different types up here. There are the curious dogs, okay? Now, when you go and buy self-medication products, the curious dogs do the following. They like to spend time comparing products and reading labels. They pull the thing off, they read the label, they put it back, they pull the next one off, and so forth. Will approach staff for advice, but on their terms. They're not going to say, I'm sick, give me this. They'll go and ask a more specific question, making it quite clear, I'm the one in control. And they don't want to be told, do that. They want things explained to them so that they can then do something with it. This tends to be mainly men. So those are the curious dogs. Then there's the cheetah. OTC shopping is frustrating and demanding. You know, frequently they're sick. This is not something they're excited about doing. They like to get in store, purchase the product, and then get out. They don't want to spend any longer in there than they humanly have to. Mainly assume price parity among brands. And this was surprising. It's like, well, you know, they're all priced about the same. They don't even think about it. It's just grab and go, grab and go. So that's another type. Cautious cat. Tend to be females, but also describes some younger male consumers. Now, researches the product information and reads packaging, okay? So they're going to sit there and they're going to do a web search on something, all right? Aware and cautious of side effects, so look at alternative brands and seek second opinions, okay? So they're very cautious, okay? That's overall good in many ways, but there's still also the obedient dogs. Now, these folks lack confidence and expertise with purchase decisions, okay? So keep in mind, they lack the confidence, but you see, they're still obedient. Will involve pharmacy personnel in OTC decision-making processes and will purchase the staff-recommended brands. So these folks are sort of doing as told, as you would expect folks who would be sort of this homo self-medicus kind of person, but at the same time, they lack confidence and expertise. So they're sort of ceding control quite easily, but they're not necessarily the most knowledgeable consumers as some of the other groups. May also describe buyers who purchase OTCs for other family members, all right? So 4 very different types and 4 different kinds of strategies you would have to try and appropriately regulate these folks. Now, the research strategy that we're dealing with, I'm focusing on Homo sapiens, real people. Our goal is to keep consumers safe while enjoying the benefits of OTC and comp med products. It's not to make them into homo self-medicuses, all right? It's to work with them where they are and take them where they need to go. Solutions to key problems may not be obvious, to regulators anyways. It may be focused on a particular group with the problem. So if we can identify the small group that has the problem, that's the group we focus on with those problems, not an average consumer. Some people may be problems regardless of whether it's OTC or comp meds or prescriptions, all right? It might be they don't follow the directions from the doctors, they don't follow directions from a pharmacist, they don't follow directions, period. It might be there's folks like that. And for the most part, the inclinations are that might be the case. Those people will, no matter what you do, will be hard to regulate. May use the consumer's own natural logic. One of the things that came out, say for example, mixing different products. Constantly they were telling us, oh, wait a second, I'm using Codral. I don't do another brand at the same time. So again, they're thinking in terms of brands. Instead of telling them, don't mix with other pseudoephedrine products, you tell folks, don't mix with other brands. It's real subtle issues in terms of wording. Find out what their logic is, go with the logic that works with them, as opposed to a logic that seems foreign to everyone. One last bit, research methods agenda. Of course, we've already done some focus groups. Certainly there's some questionnaires in the works. Everybody does those. More of a focus on issues like lab experiments and field experiments. And the last thing, which I think is probably the most exciting stuff on the horizon, is eye tracking. Now, I'm going to have to step away from the podium. This is it, guys. This is exciting. This is an eye tracker. It allows you to walk through a store, into a chemist aisles. You sit there, we can record through that little camera what people look at, gives a little red dot on what they're actually looking at. Are they looking at the brand first? Are they looking at the active ingredient? Are they picking it up? What are they reading on the side of the packet? All right? This is what we can do with this stuff. Now, nobody's ever tried looking at this stuff. You got folks who will do questionnaires saying, what do you do in the aisle? Great. Let's look at what they actually do. All right, and that's the exciting bit about this. Some of the hypotheses I have, I mean, if the massive amount of research on consumer research out there is true, the first thing they should be looking at on the packet is the brand name. All right, you know, easy enough to figure that one out. Put the glasses on and let them do it. All right, so this is the direction that we're going, okay? We're focused on a strong empirical base. What are consumers actually doing? What are they doing when? How are they doing it? Yeah, we'll still have to use things like questionnaires and the like, but as much as possible, get at their actual behavior, not necessarily the reports of their behavior. So that's the focus, that's where we're going, and I think it's going to be an exciting journey.